Thanks for staying with us. The Gaza Strip border has been the scene of regular confrontations between Palestinian demonstrators and Israeli soldiers the last few weeks. With concern, the violence could intensify in the weeks leading up to Israel's Independence Day in May. The situation is being intensified by cutbacks in aid for poverty-stricken Gaza. And today, Egypt announced it would open its usually closed border crossing with the enclave over the next 2 days for humanitarian reasons. For more, let's go to our senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari on the Gaza border live for us. And Shai, there were some confrontations on the border today. Things seem to have calmed down. You have the latest for us from the ground.
Correct, Simon. Right now it is quiet, but indeed protests did develop throughout the day along the Gaza border at different locations. Perhaps not as significant or strong as they have been in the past, but here, for example, where we are near the area of Shajaiya in Gaza or Nahal Oz on the Israeli side, we saw Palestinians here behind us burning tires that created a lot of smoke. We could hear shouting in the distance, apparently some rocks thrown. We could also see, hear, and feel ourselves the effect of tear gas being used by the Israeli forces. But it appears that the more serious cases of violence today, at least, happened further south in the area near Khan Yunis in Gaza. There, the IDF says it did fire against 4 main instigators, and indeed there was a similar number of casualties reported inside the Gaza Strip. Injuries, it appears, no deaths reported today, thankfully, as we have seen on many different occasions on Fridays where protests do tend to develop. Right now it's calmed down, and you could say that the protests today did not reach the kind of level that we've seen in the past. It's thought that next week on Land Day, which also coincides with the Jewish Passover holiday, we could see significantly more protesters.
Shai Ben-Ari, our senior defense correspondent on the Gaza border for us. Thank you, Shai.
Well, let's shift now to the growing international criticism against Russia for its suspected involvement in the poisoning of former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in the UK by a Russian military nerve agent. EU leaders gathered today in Brussels to back British Prime Minister Theresa May's call for a joint condemnation of Russia and decided to recall its own envoy to Moscow. Here's what European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker had to say.
We decided to call back our European ambassador in Moscow, first to debrief him on the outcome and the development of the discussions we had yesterday night, and second, to listen to him when he is explaining what is happening in Russia. This is an extraordinary measure. We never took it before.
Well, now let's go to London on our correspondent, Jonathan Sacerdoti. And Jonathan, is this the kind of backing that Theresa May went to Brussels looking for?
Absolutely it is. Theresa May has been saying for a few days now that Europe and Britain's allies outside Europe are standing shoulder to shoulder with Britain on this issue. And today, France, Germany, Ireland, Latvia, Lithuania, Denmark and the Czech Republic have all warned that they may take further unilateral action on top of what you just heard there, the EU saying that it stands beside Britain in saying that it is highly likely that Russia carried out this attack on British soil.
Jonathan, the UK's response to it has, some would say, been measured so far. Do you think this growing international support might change the game and legitimize the UK to take more serious or grave actions?
So far, Britain expelled those 23 Russian diplomats who it said were undisclosed intelligence agents, and Russia has now done the same. The 23 British diplomats are returning today. But we've also seen that collection of other European states saying that they will also potentially expel Russian diplomats, and that in and of itself is an escalation. So whether Britain decides to do
Jonathan
more or not,
Sacerdoti, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we're going live to the White House. President Trump is now speaking.
Deal with a wonderful ally. We're getting very close to it. It was a deal that was causing a lot of problems for our country in terms of employment and in terms of lots of other things. I might ask Secretary Ross to just say a few words about that, and then we're going to get on to this ridiculous situation that took place over the last week. So, Secretary Ross.
Thank you, Mr. President. We believe we are relatively close to a pretty comprehensive resolution with the South Korean government. It will encompass, if it goes through, both the 232s and broader trade issues. And we hope by sometime next week to be able to have a real announcement.
Thank you very much, Wilbur. I appreciate it. The last time we negotiated something like this, and as you know, it's always been a problem for our country. They get together and they create a series of documents that nobody's been able to read because it was just done. Now, you tell me who can read that quickly. It takes a long time to read it. For the last 8 years, deep defense cuts have undermined our national security. How old are, and they just, if you look at what's taken out, they've hollowed our readiness as a military unit and put America at really grave risk. My highest duty is to keep America safe. Nothing more important. The omnibus bill reverses this dangerous defense. As crazy as it's been, as difficult as it's been, as much opposition to the military as we've had from the Democrats, and it has been tremendous. I try to explain to them, you know, the military is for Republicans and Democrats and everybody else. It's for everybody. But we have tremendous opposition to creating really what will be by far the strongest military that we've ever had. We've had that from the Democrats. So if we take something for the military, they want something for, in many cases, things that are really a wasted sum of money. And it's not right, and it's very bad for our country. We're looking to do funding for our final fight in certain areas. As you know, we've gotten just about 100% of our land back from ISIS. We have troop increases necessary to accomplish what we have to do, and we have, very importantly, a pay increase for our troops. And this will be actually the largest pay increase for our incredible people in over a decade. It increases total defense spending by more than $60 billion from last year and funds the addition of critically needed ships, planes, helicopters, tanks, and submarines. We have submarines being built, the likes of which there's nothing anywhere in the world like the submarines we build. Our military equipment is the best equipment in the world. And one of the things you saw 2 days ago with Saudi Arabia and with other countries. Saudi Arabia, as an example, is buying hundreds of billions of dollars worth of our equipment. And we're getting very fast approvals on that. Therefore, as a matter of national security, I've signed this omnibus budget bill. There are a lot of things that I'm unhappy about in this bill. There are a lot of things that we shouldn't have had in this bill, but we were, in a sense, forced. If we want to build our military, we were forced to have. There are some things that we should have in the bill. But I say to Congress, I will never sign another bill like this again. I'm not going to do it again. Nobody read it. It's only hours old. Some people don't even know what it is. $1.3 trillion. It's the second largest ever. President Obama signed one that was actually larger, which I'm sure he wasn't too happy with either. But in this case, it became so big because we need to take care of our military. And because the Democrats, who don't believe in that, added things that they wanted in order to get their votes. We have to get rid of the filibuster rule. We have to get rid of the filibuster rule and go to 51 votes in the Senate if we're going to have really sustained, continued success. DACA recipients have been treated extremely badly by the Democrats. We wanted to include DACA. We wanted to have them in this bill. 800,000 people. And actually, it could even be more. And we wanted to include DACA in this bill. The Democrats would not do it. They would not do it. To prevent the omnibus situation from ever happening again, I'm calling on Congress to give me a line item veto for all government spending bills, and the Senate must end. They must end the filibuster rule and get down to work. We have to get a lot of great legislation approved, and without the filibuster rule, it'll happen just like magic. I want to address the situation on border security, which I call national defense. I call it stopping drugs from pouring across our border, and I call it illegal immigration. It's all of those things. But national defense is a very important two words, because by having a strong border system, including a wall, we are in a position militarily that is very advantageous. And before I get off of that subject, I'd like to ask Secretary Mattis to talk about what we've accomplished in terms of the military, because there has never been anything like we've been able to do. Our military is very depleted, but it's rapidly getting better. And in a short period of time, it will be stronger than it has ever been. So I'd like to ask Secretary Mattis to say a few words, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1790 in George Washington...
Well, we've been listening to President Donald Trump, where he's about to sign in the White House a $1.3 billion spending bill that will cover U.S. spending until September. It's a stopgap measure. President Trump says it's the last time that he will sign a bill like this. Earlier, he had threatened not to sign it because it does not include funding for his Mexico wall. He also mentioned that it does not solve the problem of DACA recipients, and he just spoke about it not covering the defense budget to the extent that he would like. Well, we're going to discuss more about this and about the appointment of John Bolton as his national security advisor. We're going to be joined from Washington by James Fay. He's the former Pentagon desk officer for Korea, and by John Sitilides. He's a geopolitical strategist at Trilogy Advisors. But I want to start here in the studio with our senior international affairs correspondent, Owen Alterman. And Owen, President Trump earlier saying he wasn't going to sign this bill, but at the end of the day, we would be facing possibly a government shutdown if he didn't.
Right, and this seems to be a fight that even Donald Trump didn't want to pick. Kalev, as you're right, kept us in suspense over the last few hours, but deciding at the end of the day to sign the bill to let the government be funded. Again, Trump coming under pressure from parts of his base because of those immigration provisions that were, or as you said, were not part of this huge bill. But again, at the end of the day, Trump deciding not to pick this fight with Congress, but again, laying down a marker for the future. Maybe we could say it in the same way he did with the Iran deal, where he signed those sanctions waivers and then said no more, setting down a marker in that case to expire 2 months from now.
Okay, well, we'll get you bring up the Iran deal, and we're going to be talking about it. But first, I want to go to James Fay. You were at the Pentagon dealing with Korea. John Bolton, known to have very strong views on North Korea. James Fay, what do you think about the appointment of Bolton in that position and the impact it might have?
Thanks so much, and it's great to be with you. If you were designing the worst possible national security advisor in a laboratory, I don't think you could do any better than picking John Bolton. He's an incredibly dangerous pick, one of the most dangerous decisions that Trump has made since coming into office for a variety of reasons, for ideological reasons generally, for his ideological reasons specifically when it comes to North Korea and Iran in this particular moment. And he's dangerous because he's ill-suited to the role, in a personality standpoint. Ideally, the National Security Advisor is supposed to function as a neutral arbiter, as a good and honest broker between the various positions within the U.S. government that deal with national security, and present those ideas equally to the president. John Bolton is the sort of person that has very strong views, who's going to try and railroad the people that don't agree with him. And given how aggressive his stances have been, both in the media and when he was serving in the Bush administration, I'm incredibly concerned as the sort of things that he would be telling President Trump.
All right, John Sitilides, over to you. First of all, would you agree with James Fay's assessment there? And on North Korea, it seemed at least for the past month that maybe the Trump administration was making some headway. The president announcing he's willing to meet Kim Jong-un, then scaling back on that assessment. Does Bolton's joining Trump's administration change the state of affairs between the U.S. and North Korea?
Not necessarily on the second front. As a matter of fact, I would say that in some ways it strengthens Trump's position, because the thinking is the reason that there may be talks in May is precisely because of the tougher, more muscular posture taken by the Trump administration towards Kim Jong-un, and really putting all options, including military options, on the table and keeping them there. And that will certainly continue under John Bolton. As to the larger discussion about whether he was a good choice or not, look, President Trump brought Mike Pompeo into the Department of State because their thinking is much more aligned than was the relationship between that of Trump and former Secretary Rex Tillerson. Same thing here with McMaster. President Trump is now president for about, 14, 15 months. He's much more comfortable with his own sense of how to manage the White House, how to promote his policies, and he wants people that are much more closely aligned with his thinking than was the case when earlier advisors and secretaries were brought to his attention. So I think this is going to be a very strong choice for American foreign policy. And remember that the National Security Advisor doesn't make policy. He helps coordinate the Secretary of State's options, those presented by the Secretary of Defense and other leading parts of the U.S. government. And he's there to build consensus and to provide options for the president. The president is still making decisions, and I don't think anything has changed between last week and today on President Trump's foreign policy style.
John, but it's true that John Bolton, for example, is a critic of the Iran deal like President Trump, but he is known as a neoconservative hawk who believes in military intervention, in regime change, and getting more deeply involved in places like the Middle East. Does that fit in what Donald Trump has put himself out as?
It doesn't. And it's interesting that John Bolton, from the minute he was announced as a new NSC advisor, has made very clear he's proud of his body of work, both as a former UN ambassador and as a scholar at AEI and elsewhere. But now he's simply an advisor to the president. He is not going to be checking off the boxes. He's not making any decisions. I have the sense that John Bolton knows that President Trump will be making all final decisions, but Bolton's position is critical. He will decide how issues are going to be framed for the president to consider. And again, he has to be a consensus builder, but he's made very clear his prior positions are not going to be the options being put forward to the president.
Yes, John Sitilides, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. We're going to continue this debate with James Fay and Owen Alterman here in studio. Gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break.